The Miami Dolphins introduced both their new general manager and their new head coach to the fans, the media, and the world today as Jon-Eric Sullivan and Jeff Hafley were live at the podium. We're going to break down all the best quotes, all the best takeaways as they discussed Tua, they discussed roster construction, and so much more. We're going to break that all down. Plus, I'm going to give you a pretty comprehensive list on who some potential candidates are to join Hafley's staff. So we're going to have a lot to discuss. We'll also discuss the current candidates that have already been contacted. We got a lot to go into, so do me the favor, smash the like button. If you're new, go ahead and subscribe. And as always, let's get into this. What is good, Fin Nation? What's good? It's your boy Reason, and we're back here for another one. Appreciate each and every one of you coming through as you do. Smash that like button. If you're new, go ahead and subscribe. Well, listen, we're going to get into everything. I've got a whole bunch of stuff we're going to look at here. I'm going to break down some of their quotes, some of the takeaways. We're going to go into it, and we're going to go into it pretty heavy. But I got to say this. I was very impressed coming away with what Sullivan and Hafley said in front of the podium. We'll go into their philosophies and their core beliefs and everything like that in a bit here, but very, very impressed. I'll tell you one thing. They started off on the right foot. They said a lot of the right things. And another thing, thank everything holy in this world that we don't have to listen to 15,000 uhs, ums, and huns throughout a press conference. First of all, it's funny because they kind of look like, they look like brothers. Let's be honest here. But just the demeanor was all business. It was all business. And I loved that. They just came across as all business. I came away with the sense of, man, I can't wait to see these guys get started. And what's interesting, they did mention the cap situation. And I've been trying to tell people, with the Malik Willis situation, that cap is not anything to play with right now. And a lot of the cap we can free up is post June 1st, not stuff you can play with in March. So I'm not expecting a big splashy free agency by any stretch of the imagination. I think it's going to be smart, calculated, and strategic. And I'll be honest with you. Quinn Ewers was named. Tua was named. I'm not mad if they roll Quinn Ewers or some bridge quarterback and we're trying to go for one of those 2027 quarterbacks. You're not going to have me mad. You're not going to have me feeling a way about that by any stretch of the imagination. So I was just really impressed, and we'll get into everything that was the most impressive to me here today. We'll get into everything and what was most impressive in terms of takeaways, because there really was a lot. I really, I'm more excited about Hafley than I was when, we knew for a week leading up to Hafley being named that he was going to be the guy. And I'm more excited now after listening to the both of them talk than I was before. Now, you're going to say, Reason, well, you had Jeff Hafley as your number 4, head coaching candidate. Yeah, I did. But I cooled on him because I Shula and Kubiak, I grew on them through the process. So I cooled on him a little bit. But I really like what I heard. I really like what I saw. But I'll say this. How many times have we heard someone come up to the podium, whether it's a coach or executive, and say the right thing, and we end up right back in this same position in a couple years? So for those who are going to be pessimistic, for those who are going to be cautious, for those who are going to be restrained, I understand you. I get you. You're not going to be, accosted over here for having that type of view. I think a lot of us are very show and prove right now, and rightfully so. Now, I think I will also say this. I feel like if Sullivan and Hafley would have came either last year or they would have been here, they would have been the choice instead of McDaniel and Greer. I think fans would have been a lot more open to it. But, that extra year after what we saw in 2024, that 2025 season, that took, it soured the viewpoint of a lot of people around the league and what we had here, but it also further soured the fans. I think we would have been more open and more relieved if this would have happened last year. And we'd also be already 1 year into the rebuild and reconstruction. So, I get everyone who wants to will take that wait and see approach. I get it. You're not going to get any pushback from me. Now, what was interesting too was Ross going up in front of the podium before everyone spoke and him saying he's basically feeling what we were feeling in terms of, not having a winner on the field, right? In terms of being frustrated with the results. I get that. And what's funny too is you listen to Jon-Eric Sullivan, and there were some today, and when you saw us sit down with Travis Wingfield, I mean, the slights have been thrown at the past regime in terms of how this roster was built. And in terms of certain philosophies, especially free agency, like you can tell, Jon-Eric Sullivan is not a fan of how this team operated in not only free agency, but with trades. So, I do listen. We've talked about how not only did they go from the opposite of Mike McDaniel with the head coaching decision being Jeff Hafley, they went in the opposite direction of Chris Grier. Now, Chris Grier has a scouting background, but he ain't on his own point as this guy, as Jon-Eric Sullivan. And Chris Grier, they have totally different philosophies in how they build a roster. You're right. And you can already tell, I'm telling you right now, they're going to have totally different philosophies when it comes to running the football and building out the trenches than the previous regime too. Now, we started to see Mike McDaniel leaning on running the football a lot more, but it was obviously too little too late. But you can tell right now that's going to be something that is going to be a focal point moving forward. Now, I don't think we need much upgrades in the background. I actually think HN, Wright, and Ollie fit what they're going to want to do on the ground. So, all right, let's go ahead and we're going to get into everything that was said. But before we do, and we're going to break it down, as we're going to be very comprehensive with this. Before we do, I do want to shout out the sponsor of today's video. That, of course, is Sleeper. If you think you know football, try to turn your football knowledge into real money with the Sleeper app, the ultimate fantasy sports app that could turn game day into payday. Just download the Sleeper app, pick more or less on your favorite players with more stats than any other daily fantasy app. Just choose 2 or more of your favorite players from pregame or live. Pick more or less from the predicted stats, and you can win up to 1,000 times your money if your picks win. Use promo code Phinside, and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions do apply. Just see Sleeper's terms of use for details. Shout out to Sleeper for sponsoring the video. All right. Without further ado, I would have been here a lot earlier, but your boy, I always want to be informative. I always want to bring everything to the table. I'm sometimes too over detailed. I get it, but I wanted to clip out all the main takeaways and talking points I really liked from the presser. And we're going to go in chronological order. So let's start off with Sullivan's drafting and developing philosophy. I thought this was a very key little part near the start of the whole press conference. Let's get into this.
The pillars will be a draft and develop philosophy. I've already spoken on that in previous interviews. But we will draft, develop, and retain our own. There are things that come with that.
Robert Hunt.
Number one is culture. When you raise your own, people are vested. They're bought in. There's a financial component to it with rookie contracts. It keeps you in a healthy cap situation. But the most important thing is the culture piece of it. Free agency, we will be very intentional and deliberate how we move about that. We will definitely utilize it when we get into a healthy cap situation, and we can. But we'll be disciplined, will be intentional, and we will chase difference makers that add value to the field immediately, but also add value to our locker room in terms of the kind of culture that we want to build. It's my job to turn over every rock within the player acquisition game, if you will. We will utilize every avenue, and the most important thing that I want everybody to take away today is we will bring in the right kind of people. I've said many a times, Miami is a very attractive place to come and play football. It's an attractive place to work. But if you don't infuse this locker room with the right kind of people, it can be a distraction in a hurry. That is our job as a personnel staff, to give Coach Hafley the kind of guys that want to chase championships, that are selfless, that are mentally and physically tough, who have a burning desire to be the best football players that they can be.
Come on, man. I mean, you know, he's talking about players like Tyreek Hill and such. You know, if you didn't see my latest update for Patrons and channel members, one of the stories that I relayed was in 2024, when Tyreek Hill was, you remember when he skipped practice in for our season finale against the Jets, and he was on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, and he was working the cash register at his store? Well, I'll give you I already told patrons and channel members this, so I'll tell you this. Okay, he was already telling players he was going to skip that practice. And he was telling players why he was going to skip that practice. He was telling players, 2023 was our window. We missed our window. What's the point? You look at Tyreek Hill with all these OnlyFans models or whatever the case may be, is all these women and stuff. You look at Xavier Howard and his history. This is exactly what they're talking about. You got guys who have realized, hey, we're not going to come in here and bring in guys that are going to be problems and end up having to make excuses, because the thing with McDaniel and that Tyreek story I just told you. So Tyreek tells the players why he isn't coming. The next day when he doesn't show up at the team meeting, every player in that room knows. It's spread through all the players. They know why he's not there. What does McDaniel do? McDaniel gets up in front of all the players and treats them like they're children. Blatantly lies to all of them. Tells them all directly, oh, Tyreek Hill had some personal matters come up. He won't be able to be here today. When every single player in there knew he was going around, yeah, I'm skipping practice because 2023 was our season. We missed the boat. What's the point? So that's what he's like. I'm telling you right now, they know all this stuff. And they're changing this. And that stuff ain't going to fly here. It ain't going to fly here. And the whole building about free agency, what is he, and being smart through free agency and building through the draft? Who do you think he's talking about? He's talking about Greer's terrible job. That's what he's talking about. And he's right. He ain't lying. Shout out to Sullivan. Now, Hafley, he discussed some of his core beliefs. Now, listen to what Hafley had to say regarding his own core beliefs.
I've kind of had the core beliefs which we're going to instill in this football team, into the players and into this organization. And the first one is trust. And a lot of people use that word lightly. I don't. And I think right now in the world we live in, a lot of people are slow to trust. It might be you. It might be the players, and that's all right, because I'm going to earn it. Because actions speak louder than words. I'm not going to be one to sit here and talk a lot, but I'm going to follow up with what I say I'm going to do, and so are our team. The next thing that I believe in is belief, and I think this is really powerful, because it's a hard world right now where people read stuff, they see stuff, and you'd be surprised on how much insecurity there is with players, with coaches, with everybody. And I'm going to let those players know that I believe in them. And in turn, what you're going to see a group of guys that believe in themselves. And that becomes powerful. Because when they start to believe in themselves and our team starts to connect with each other, then look out. Because you get that connection, and then we want to talk about accountability, then we have accountability. And accountability is love. And it's an extreme level of accountability. And when we build a standard and it starts to become real, the player will start to hold themselves accountable. But that's going to start with me. And the final thing that I'm going to talk to them about every single day is toughness. That's physically, that's mentally, that's everything that we do. And it's a toughness that thrives on competition. And it's a toughness that reflects the people and the spirit of the city of Miami. And that's what I'm most excited about. And as we piece this thing together, it's going to take time, and there's going to be a lot of hard work. But then it's going to be built the right way, like the foundation that was laid for me when I was coaching Division III football, and I learned how to do things the right way. And that's how we're going to do it here, with a staff that's going to buy in and with a group of men that are going to give everything that they got. And I can look you guys in the eye and tell you, I cannot wait to get started.
He's a very good speaker, but we already knew coming in he'd be a very good speaker, and we already knew he'd be a connector. And you see, he talks about trust and accountability. I go back to what was happening under Mike McDaniel. One of the reasons Jalen Ramsey wanted out of here was because there was no accountability. The coach wasn't holding the proper people accountable. And then he was holding the people he shouldn't be holding to that standard accountable. It was ass backwards. And, you know, you look at Hafley and he just exudes toughness. Like, you know, we really talked about the finesse and how the team was taking on the personality of their head coach. You take one look at Hafley and you're like, oh my God, you know who he looks like? I don't know if you guys remember. I don't know if you guys remember the old Simpsons episode, the flashback to Grandpa Simpson watching the Super Bowl. And, you know, he's watching Joe Namath and he rips on Joe Namath's hair. And then he talks about, you know, he flashes that Johnny Unitas was the buzz cut. And he's like, now Johnny Unitas, there's a haircut you can write home about. It's absolutely hilarious. It's literally, but he's no nonsense. And you just look at him and you listen to him talk. You're like, okay, I'm comfortable with my team taking on that personality compared to the personality they just took on under Mike McDaniel. I'm just saying. So, and I love what his core beliefs are. And he talks about building the foundation and building it the right way. Now, we're going to hear them talk about the cap situation. We already heard Sullivan mention it once, but we're going to hear them talk about the cap situation multiple times. And then you listen to what Hafley said about building it the right way and building the foundation. They're letting us know that, yeah, and they do let us know that it's going to be a journey. It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough sledding early on because they got to undo the mess that Greer put together. So, they got to undo that. And I'll tell you, he comes away no nonsense, and I love that. Now, Sullivan then made a very interesting comment about what Ross said to him directly. Check this out.
But he made it very clear. I mean, quite frankly, his words to me were, if you don't get this done, you will never be able to say it was because you didn't have the resources, which tells me everything I need to know. I think we all know that every place is not like that. I come from a place, the last 22 years, it's all about winning. Every decision we make is about winning. And I could feel that from Steven and Danny and Tom and everybody that was involved in the process from the jump. And so, yes, there were some more specific things that were talked about, but at the end of the day, the burning desire to win and his ability to articulate how important it was and what he was willing to do to get there spoke volumes to me. I, to be perfectly honest with you, of course, I wanted to be a general manager in the National Football League, but I wasn't leaving to go just anywhere. The place that I worked at afforded me that flexibility. This was very attractive to me because of Steven, his desire to win, and the things he's willing to do to get us there.
So there you go. Stephen Ross told him directly, if you don't get this done, it won't be because of the resources I haven't made available to you. They'll all be made available to you. If you don't get this done, it'll be on you. Ross sounds like it. No more screwing around for Stephen Ross, huh? He had enough. Chris Greer pushed him to his limits. Now it's like, hey, man, I will make every resource available to you. If you don't get it done, it's on you. It ain't on me. And hey, listen, Ross, if that's, I like it. I respect it. I'm riding with you on it, but just don't meddle. If that's the route we're taking, do not meddle. Let them do what they got to do. And if they fall on their face, they fall on their face. But don't meddle like you did with Flores, with Gase, with Tua and Flores, with McDaniel, all the way back to Sperano. Do not meddle. Do not meddle. So now, let's get into a great question about what Sullivan learned in Green Bay and what he's bringing here from Green Bay, the Green Bay way, if you will.
Dave Hyde of the Sun Sentinel. Jon-Eric, you both you guys are obviously from Green Bay, and you bring that mindset, the ideas. Could you just talk, and you did a little in the opening, of what the Green Bay way is, or what you two hope to bring here?
Sure. I think in terms of player acquisition principles and philosophy, it's, I'm being a little bit redundant, so forgive me if there's frustration level out there, but what we've always done is build through the draft. And again, it's about culture. Now, we have certain principles and pillars within how we approach the draft that I won't get into because I don't want to give away the secrets to the sauce, so to speak. But we're going to build through the draft. We're going to retain our own players, if at all possible, because of the culture piece of it. I think that has allowed Green Bay to have sustained success over time. And then, again, there's a financial component, rookie contracts, all that kind of thing. We will utilize free agency. We have to get back to a spot within the salary cap that'll allow us to do that, and we will. But I think if you look over the years at the intentionality of which they've gone about it, Ted was Charles Woodson. When Brian Gutekunst first took the job, we were a little more active with how we went about, or a little more active to kind of jumpstart the roster. Zadarius Smith, who was an All-Pro that year. Preston Smith, who finished his Green Bay tenure with 37.5 sacks. Obviously, Josh Jacobs and Xavier McKinney the years before. So we're not just checking boxes so that we can look busy. We're intentional about the caliber of player and then what they bring to the locker room. You can't have good culture if you got guys that aren't bought in and wired right for what you're trying to build. And so that's what I would say is we're going to build through the draft, and we'll be very selective and deliberate in free agency. I think you have to be. If you're not, you're treading in dangerous waters. But then there's certain principles within that again, I won't get into because I'm helping out our competition. But I just think the culture and the caliber of players that we've targeted over time, and then the intentionality of the standard, if you will, within how we go about our draft process allows us to pick good players, but also hit on players in the middle and late rounds. I think this is not to sit up here and pat myself on the back or say that Green Bay is a perfect place. Look, it's not an exact science. We've missed. You guys can do your homework. We've missed, but we've hit on a lot of players over my time there in the middle to late rounds that allow us to be successful and get value out of players that maybe some other teams aren't.
And I mean, that's the key, right? Hitting in the 3rd to 7th round allows, freedom in free agency, and allows you to be more strategic and selective with free agents because you're filling roster holes, you're filling roster holes out of necessity, not out of desperate need, which is where we were at in a lot of positions with Chris Greer. And I find it interesting. You hear him say, he doesn't really want to give away too much of the recipe. And I love hearing that, and I'll tell you why. If you've been watching me since we started this channel in 2020, I really wanted Ozzie Newsome, right? One of the reasons why I was really high on Chad Alexander if they didn't go with Jon-Eric Sullivan was because he came up for 20 years under Ozzie Newsome, the same way Jon-Eric Sullivan came up under all those great executives in Green Bay for the last 20 years. And we always talk about Green Bay. We talk about the Ravens. We talk about the Steelers. We talk about these storied franchises who have been drafting well for 20 plus years, from the trenches to the run game to whatever. And they've got their blueprint in place of not only how they construct, but what they look for in the draft, how they draft, how they build out, et cetera, et cetera. And, that's why these teams have found sustained success, because as new executives have come along, whether it be player or personnel executives, whether it be GMs, whatever the case may be, is they still follow that blueprint that was laid out before them. They just continue to build off of it. And I like that we're having something like that be brought over here, a foundation of how you construct a roster, of how you build through the draft, not a let's wing it. And that's what it kind of felt like at times under Chris Grier. Let's wing it. Whereas, again, I go back to this. It feels like under Jon-Eric Sullivan, everything will be, especially in free agency, especially because they keep mentioning the cap situation we have, everything will be strategic and calculated, et cetera, et cetera. And again, that is one of the big areas where Chris Grier whiffed, was those mid to late round guys to fill out your roster with. Whereas if Jon-Eric Sullivan can hit there, it's going to make turnover a lot easier. If you can't afford guys that are up for a second contract or a first big contract off the rookie contract, if you can't afford them, it'll be much easier to swallow that pill of them potentially having to leave to greener pastures. And by that, I mean more money than you can offer, because you'll have guys in the waiting. Like, it would have been one thing if Robert Hunt left for all that money to Carolina and we had a legitimate option waiting, but we had Liam Eichenberg. And what does it come down to? The trades we made for Chubb and Tyreek Hill, we were giving up a lot of picks that were going to be needed to fill out depth and eventual starting spots of the roster, and we didn't. And so then now you're backed into a corner where, because those assets are gone, now you got to spend money. And now we're going back to, you're not being strategic in free agency, you're being desperate. You're having to sign people out of need, and them and their agents know that, instead of necessity. And so I really like what we hear from Jon-Eric Sullivan in terms of what he's bringing here. And, again, bringing a blueprint and a foundation that has worked for over 20 years. I mean, look at how many head coaches have been in Green Bay. Look at how many quarterbacks have been in Green Bay since, the 80s. So now they were asked about the quarterback situation, and now we're going to get into a lot of quarterback talk into some of the clips we're going to play. So we've already, if you go look at Jon-Eric Sullivan's sit down with Travis Wingfield, we already pretty much knew when he mentioned core players, Tua Tagovailoa wasn't mentioned in that core. Even Jalen Waddle, Travis had to remind him about Jalen Waddle. Makes you wonder there, but look at the quarterback situation. Let's get into this.
Well, what are your thoughts on the Dolphins quarterback situation? How do you plan to address that over the coming months?
Sure. Obviously that's a huge question looming over the organization. I'd be naive to think that everybody doesn't understand that. I have a lot of respect for Tua. He's a good football player. He's accomplished a lot in this league. I think whether it's Tua or anybody else, it's unfair and irresponsible for me to sit up here and talk about anything specific before I've talked to the player himself. Quarterback is the most important position in professional sports. I also think it's the most dependent. These guys heard me say this in the interview process. We will evaluate that position like we evaluate every other position, and we will do what is best for this football team. With Tua or anybody else, to sit up here today and tell you that I have a great understanding of what we're going to do or which way we're going to go, that would be a lie, because there's just too much work to do. There's too many conversations to be had at this point. A lot of respect for Tua, what he's accomplished in this league. I thought Quinn did a great job at the end of the season. We have to figure that out. We will, but today is not the day I can give you that answer. I understand the question. I just can't give you that answer today.
So they're going to talk about the quarterback a little bit more in depth and give you a little bit more answers as we go on here. But, I think we all pretty much understood that, the one thing is he hasn't spoken to Tua yet. Now, if you're a franchise quarterback, if you're, let's say if you get a general manager job or a head coaching job in Baltimore, the first thing you're going to do is talk to Lamar Jackson. If you get in Cincinnati, first thing you're going to do is talk to Joe Burrow. That already tells you what we already knew, that it's pretty much over. And now you get into it. Are we going to get into the bridge situation, or we get into the draft situation? Now we're going to talk about the quarterback more here, so we'll save our thoughts there. But how they're going to construct the roster This is how Sullivan and Hafley think they are going to construct the roster.
Hi, question for Sully. You mentioned that it's going to be a process of building this roster out and getting it to where you guys want to be. Just from a construction standpoint, where does that start? What area on this roster does that start with? And do you realistically need to have a quarterback in place, have that situation figured out before you start to figure other things out, or what's that process going to look like?
Sure. I think, obviously it always starts with the quarterback. I mean, anybody that's in this business will tell you that, but we'll build this from the inside out. I think you have to do that. I think you have to make sure that your line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball is big, tough, resilient, and that there's depth so that you can survive it's a violent game. There's going to be injuries, that you can survive injuries. Yep. The thing that I think we have to focus most on right now is making sure that we build infrastructure. And yes, we need to get the quarterback situation in place, but we're not going to do it in an irresponsible manner where we sacrifice building the infrastructure of this football team so that when we do find our guy, he can go be successful. We've all seen teams that go about it maybe in a questionable manner, and you get a really good player at quarterback, but he can't stay healthy because he's getting killed or he doesn't have anybody to throw to. So Joe
Burrow,
we will find our guy, but we're going to make sure that we're building the infrastructure along the way. So when we do find our trigger man, whoever that may be, whether it's Tua, Quinn, or somebody that's not in the building, we have a team that he can go play and win with.
So interesting thing. First of all, he's mentioned Quinn Ewers twice. And I've said, hey, go get a bridge quarterback or draft a guy in the third round. Let him compete with Quinn Ewers. Whoever wins the job, roll with 1 year. And I really think they're kind of setting this up for the first year. It's probably not going to be that great because they've mentioned the cap hell. They mentioned it's going to be a long journey. They've mentioned they've got to basically rebuild this roster. But notice how he said they're going to build from the inside out. Again, another slight at the past regime of building outside in don't work. That isn't a proven model of success, especially when you get into the December and January months. Remember, these guys are from Green Bay. They're not from Tampa Bay. They're not from Jacksonville. Okay, they've won in cold weather. They've watched teams win in cold weather. They know what it takes to win in cold weather. When Hafley was in college, Ohio State, Boston College, not exactly Cancun, right? So you listen and they focused on the line of scrimmage, and it sounds like they want him to be big, mean. I think Savaiinaea is going to be just fine. And by the way, Savaiinaea was actually at the press conference today. Malik Washington, Kenneth Grant, Jordan Phillips, Jason Mateer, and Jonas Savaiinaea were at the press conference today. Kader Kohu was there as well. So, Patrick Paul, Aaron Brewer, Jonas Savaiinaea, they're going to be fine. Savaiinaea is going to be fine under this because he's not going to be asked to do a lot of this stuff. Well, he's going to do a similar stuff because I do assume we're going to go to some form of a West Coast offense that has Shanahan ties. But, I mean, we'll see. It won't be as speed focused and predominant, but he's still going to have to get out in space and, make blocks and stuff like that. But I trust they're going to coach up these guys. And so, I really like what they said there. They want to win at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. They want to win at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. Thank God. Shout out to the Dolphin fan. He says, considering this team did win 7 games and had potential to win 3 others, they have a successful draft. I'm of the belief this team could be more competitive than people think. I agree. Especially if Quinn Ewers hits, especially if they draft a guy in the 3rd round that hits. I mean, I've had this conversation and I've told him this privately. I feel like if we had Mendoza, I think if we had Dante Moore this year, we make the playoffs. I honestly do. I think we make the playoffs with Dante Moore. I think we make the playoffs with Fernando Mendoza. I think if you had the quarterback this year, you make the playoffs. So I think Dolphin fans, dead on. You had a good draft. And if you figure out that quarterback situation and you get a good enough bridge, or you find a legit option in the draft, or Quinn turns into it, yeah, I agree. You're right back to competitiveness. I agree with that 110%. So now Hafley was asked about what he thinks the offense is going to look like, and as well as if he, and what Sullivan had just said. Remember, He said he didn't want to talk about the quarterback situation and he hadn't talked to Tua. But then he comes around and what does he say? He comes out and he flat out said, yeah, we got to figure out the quarterback situation. So again, he told you without telling you Tua ain't the guy. He told you without telling you that. And that they're going to go get their guy. Because he basically said they're going to go find their own trigger man. So we'll see. Now, Hafley was asked about what that offense will look like under him. And he was also asked if he intends to call plays on defense. So this is what he said.
Haf, I wanted to ask you about offense and defense real quick. Do you plan to call defensive plays, and what type of offense would you ideally have here?
Well, yeah, good questions, and thanks for calling me Haf. It makes me feel very comfortable, though my brother would tell you he's the first half and might get insulted. Yeah, I'm going to call plays. That's really important to me, and I have a plan in place with potential hires that will allow me to be the head coach in the offseason, kind of like I watched Kyle Shanahan do it and kind of like how I watched Matt do it in Green Bay. But I am going to call plays. It's really important to me. It's something that I love to do. It really connects me with that group. I think it will bring a lot of energy to that side of the football, and I think the details will be exactly how I want them early on as we go. Offense and defense, schematically speaking, it's all going to start with fundamentals and technique to me. Whether that's getting off a block, whether that's blocking, it's putting your eyes in the right place. It's the little things that I think are lost right now in football. So that will be the foundation. And then what's it going to look like on offense is what everybody's going to want to know. I'm never one to just say, here's the playbook. This is what we're running, regardless of who we have. I'm not like that. I want to take a close look at what we have. And I want to make sure we fit that and give our players the best chance to succeed. Now, I need to hire an offensive coordinator. And there's certain core beliefs that I really do believe in, like running the ball and being really physical up front. So when they know we're going to run the ball, we're still going to run it well. That's going to be huge for me. And then we need to build it around the quarterback. And you have to surround that quarterback with weapons. The O-line, the wideouts, the backs, so it's not all him. Because do I like being under center and do I like running the football because the play pass off that? You create separation between the second and third level, and from a defensive standpoint, that's really hard. The screen game, the keepers, everything looking the same, hunting explosives, right? Those are things that have always given me trouble as a defensive coach, and I'd like to implement some of those. But it's going to come back to what can our players do at a high level, evolve as we go, to figure that out, to give them the best chance to have success and ultimately win. And I've taken a lot of pride on the defensive side of the ball, whether we've been 3-4 spacing, 4-3 spacing, had to evolve this year when Micah Parsons walked in with a week to go and had to change stuff. That's what good coaching is. It's developing, it's teaching, and it's getting the most out of players. So I'm excited for that.
Man, I mean, so he wants to run the football. He kind of, echoed the sentiments of Jon-Eric Sullivan. They want to dominate the line of scrimmage on offense. That is a breath of fresh air. Oh my Lord. Remember, we went from them telling us we want to be mean up front and, we want to dominate the line of scrimmage on both sides. We've come to that from a GM and head coach that would tell us, well, you guys are more concerned about the offensive line than we are. And the offensive line would end up being the biggest concern by the end of the season. And they would end up having egg on their face. And we would all look right. Now we've gone to guys who have identified that, want to fix that, and want that to be a strength of this team. Oh my God, there is a Lord and Savior above. I love it. I love it. And then you listen to what Hafley said he wants on offense. He wants what's hard to defend for him as a defensive coordinator. And I think he's going to take that same approach at quarterback. Jordan Love, when he's in his bag, it's hard to defend. Out of structure, in the pocket, the throws he can make off different platforms and different arm angles. He's hard to defend when he's going. And I think that's what they're going to look for in their quarterback. Now, does that mean that's going to be a, Taylon Green or a Cole Payton or, someone of that sense in the draft this year. I don't know. You know, Ty Simpson is someone I keep bringing up that if he's on the board at 11, you know, Jordan Love light in a lot of big areas, right? You got a big arm. You know, he got legs. He can create out of structure. The footwork is pretty good. You look at, especially in the first half of that season, just the sample size isn't huge. You know, but they're going to want someone who can beat you in the pocket and probably beat you out of it. I know Cade Klubnik has some legs to him, but I thought he was terrible this year, Klubnik. Drew Aller, you know, he's got the physical profile and the athleticism, but he was god-awful this year. So they want to build that offense. That's something that's hard to defend for other defensive coordinators. So we'll see what that turns into, and we'll talk about potential candidates in just a moment here. But first, now back to the quarterback situation. I want you to listen to this, because Sullivan basically, he discusses the quarterbacks that have been in Green Bay during his tenure there and what he learned in terms of searching for a franchise quarterback now that he's part of a franchise that has to conduct that search for a franchise quarterback. Check this out.
Welcome to both of you guys. Al Butler here from UPI. My question's for Sully. You're coming from a place where it's pretty rare. You had, you count on one hand the amount of quarterbacks you had over 30 years. I'm curious what in that process you learned about finding that guy and what you're going to look for here.
Sure. I mean, I've learned if you can help it, don't wait till you don't have a quarterback to find one. You know what I mean? It starts there. If you think about what we did with Aaron, you know, I watched Ted Thompson. I referred to him earlier, talking about him always doing what is best for the team, even when it's not popular. You got to remember, Brett was still in place and playing at a very high level. And there were a lot of people in that building that didn't think drafting a quarterback who was going to sit for an extended amount of time with a first-round pick made a lot of sense with where we were as a team. And he did in that moment what he knew was best for the Green Bay Packers, and the rest speaks. The history speaks for itself. And then we turned around and did it again with Jordan. You know, when we had Aaron. So it starts there, right? The quarterback position, again, is the most important position in sports, in my opinion. Certainly the most important position in football. We're going to invest in that position every year if we can. Now, depending on where we are as a football team, it'll be at different values. But we will draft quarterbacks every year, if not every other year, because I think you have to. You know, if you hit on a guy, great. And if not, if you hit on two, you have trade value. Again, I think if you look at the history of the Green Bay Packers all the way back to Ron Wolf, I mean, Brett Favre's backups were Matt Hasselbeck, Kurt Warner, Aaron Brooks, Ty Detmer. You can go on down the line. I can't say enough about the importance of it, and we'll be very active in acquiring quarterbacks to make sure that room is deep as we can make it.
I mean, that's got to give you, I know there's a big portion of this fan base that wants us to draft someone every year. And, you know, the Packers are like that. They do, it feels like they do draft a quarterback every year, right? You know, they just signed, didn't they just sign like Kyle McCord? I think they just signed Kyle McCord from the Eagles to like a futures contract too, right? But it seems like almost every year they draft one, because they drafted Michael Pratt in 2024. They drafted Sean Clifford in 2023, right? They do draft quarterbacks over there, you know? And remember, they drafted Jordan Love in 2020. And at a position where we need to hit, I mean, you got to throw as many darts as you board, but he's smart about it. He said it's going to be depending on where the quarterback position is, and i.e. if we have a franchise quarterback, yeah, we'll still draft another quarterback, but you're not going to be drafting him in the third or fourth round. When he's talking about value, he's talking about like, you know, late day three, draft the guy, get him in there, and maybe you hit. And he's right. And this is something we've talked about on this channel, right? Whether it be when I was talking about Skylar Thompson's development. What was I saying about Skylar? Well, people were out here, Skylar QB1, Scott. No, I was saying, no. We want him to eventually work himself into a legitimate QB2 with curious QB1 upside, so you can trade him. And I would always go back to the Patriots and how the Patriots traded, you know, Brissett, Garoppolo, right? And I said the same thing with Quinn Ewers. Now, I think Quinn Ewers is obviously more talented than Skylar, but I said the worst case scenario you want to come into is a legitimate backup option with some curious QB1 upside, because then if you have a franchise quarterback, you could trade Quinn. Now, we're in a position now where if Quinn hits, you got to keep him because we don't have a franchise quarterback. So, I'm totally down by that philosophy. And again, this roster is very void of options at the position right now. We know they're going to move off of Tua, and that's going to, they're not going to bring back Zach Wilson. We know the Malik Willis rumors, and I say, hey, if Malik wants 8 to 12 million, it makes sense. But if Malik wants 15 to 20 million a year, I don't see that happening. So now what do you do? So, I mean, listen, I was totally blown away by that press conference, but we've been down this path before. We've been given the song and dance by many new regimes coming in here. And I think these guys hear the outside noise about that. You listen to what Hafley said, and he's talking about how he's going to show everyone, how he's going to prove to everyone, basically, that he's the right guy for this job. He knows what it is. How much time should these two have? I'm thinking 3 to 4 years, depending on success and roster from year 1 to. A lot of bad needs to be undone before. They both are on 5-year deals from what I know. I agree. They need at least 3 years. But I think we'll have a grasp in year 2. I think we'll have a idea of the path we're on after year 1, and we'll have a real grasp of where we're at and where we're going to be after year 2. Now, I will say this. History isn't on their side in terms of coach and, it is on Sullivan's side with Greer, but on Hafley's side, how many guys live out their 5-year contract here? So, but I think you're right. They need at least 3 or 4. You got to teach it like a draft pick. You got to give a draft pick 3 years before you decide whether they're a bust or not. So, and they should have us on the right path by year 3. And I agree with what EM said earlier. I think we're much more competitive than people think. And I'll add to his thought like I did earlier. You fix that quarterback situation and all of a sudden, I don't know, we can compete. This roster isn't that void of talent. It's not like it's the Titans. So one of the big questions is what is his staff going to look like? And I'm going to give you some information on that. So we do know the Dolphins have requested permission to speak with Cowboys assistant special teams coach Carlos Polk for their special teams coordinator opening, per source. No word yet on if Miami has asked about Steve Shimko, the quarterback coach in Dallas. Remember, he worked at Boston College with Jeff Hafley. So Carlos Polk, all right. He is a guy who he's been coaching since 2009. Started with the Chargers. He was in Tampa Bay in 2014. And I think they just missed overlapping, if I remember correctly. Because Jeff Hafley left by 2013, I believe. But Carlos Polk, he had just missed him, I believe. So he's been an assistant special teams coach his whole time, whether it's with Grassmont College, the Chargers, all the way through to where he's at right now. So now remember, he was a former player as well, former linebacker, a 4th-round pick by the San Diego Chargers. So Carlos Polk, there you go. Could be a first-time special teams coordinator in Miami. Now for the offensive coordinator, we've got a few updates. A name to watch for the Dolphins OC job is Vikings pass game coordinator Brian Angelichio. He and new Miami head coach Jeff Hafley have worked together off and on for 2 decades. First at Pitt, then at Rutgers, and then Tampa Bay, and finally with the Browns. Yeah, they have a pretty extensive history together. So there is a potential candidate to watch out for, according to Jonathan Jones. Now, continuing with the offensive coordinator search, the Miami Dolphins have requested to interview Texans quarterback coach Jerrod Johnson for their coordinator role. So this is different than a name to watch. We know there is a straight up request here. And remember, Jerrod Johnson, he went undrafted out of Texas A&M. He played quarterback at Texas A&M from 06 to 2010, right? And then he was basically a practice squad guy for his whole career in the NFL. Now, he's been coaching since 2017. Started out in San Francisco, part of the Bill Walsh Diversity Coaching Fellowship. Then he went to the Colts, and now he's been to the Vikings and the Texans ever since. I will say, after what I mean, he's been the quarterback coach since 2023 for CJ Stroud. Hey, I don't know a ton on Jerrod Johnson, but based off what I've seen from CJ Stroud, Darrell Bevel is someone I would give that job to over him. CJ Stroud isn't exactly going to win you a job anytime soon with his play the last couple of years. All right, let's be real here. Now there's a Slowick tie there as well, right? He's tied to Bobby Slowick, who obviously is still on the Dolphins staff, who has big ties to Hafley as well. So that's what we know in terms of guys requested. Some other guys that have been mentioned, Albert Breer. He mentioned Adam Stenovich, who's the offensive coordinator with the Packers. He could maybe move laterally because he's not calling plays under LaFleur, right? Now, I don't think Dabble's going to come here, and I don't think Monken's going to come here. Bobby Slowick, I think, makes a lot of sense. On the defensive side, some of the guys he mentioned were Sean Duggan, who he's followed Hafley from Ohio State to Boston College to Green Bay, and DeMarcus Covington, who's with the Packers right now. Both are with the Packers, but Covington could get interviewed for the defensive coordinator job in Green Bay. So I went ahead and I made some graphics for you, and I'm going to continue to add to these graphics as we go along. So here are some offensive staff hires. These are with like coaching ties, right? So you've got Jason Vrabel, who we've talked about. He's a current passing game coordinator in Green Bay. You got Sean Mannion. He's a guy where he makes a lot of sense. He's got really heavy ties. He's got really, really heavy ties. So we'll see what comes with Mannion, but he's got really heavy ties. Luke Getsy, he has been a offensive coordinator in this league before. Steve Shimko, if you've got an asterisk next to your name on this list, that means he worked with Hafley at Boston College. Shimko, he's the current Cowboys quarterback coach. He was Hafley's OC in Boston College. Bobby Slowick, we went over that. Mick Lombardi, he's the current 49ers quarterback coach. Again, ties through coaching. John Embry. Yes, John Embry does have ties back to their time with the 49ers. Now, it just doesn't mean offensive coordinator. He could be filling out his offensive staff with a lot of these names. Brian Angelichio, who was mentioned right there. There you go. Connor Lewis, he is the current Packers pass game specialist and game management coach. He's someone to keep an eye on as well. I think another one too here is Andrew Janico. He's the current quarterback coach in Seattle. He's been a quarterback coach in New Orleans, Chicago, and Minnesota. He was at Rutgers and Tampa Bay with Hafley, so that's where his ties come from. Frank Cignetti Jr., yes, a Cignetti from Indiana. He has long ties to Hafley. They worked together at Boston College and Rutgers and Pittsburgh, I believe, as well. The offensive line coach in Indiana, Bob Bustad, he has some ties to him as well. So there's another one you could add to the list. And then Rob Chudzinski, he is the Boston College senior offensive analyst. He was on his Boston College staff, Hafley's Boston College staff. And then defensive, Tem Lakubu. That's a guy where there's going to be, you're going to hear him a lot. Tim Lakabu, sorry. He's the outside linebackers coach with the Jaguars. He worked at Rutgers with Hafley. He worked with him in Tampa. He worked with him in the 49ers. He worked with him at BC, at Boston College. So they've got serious strong ties. That's going to be a strong name you're going to hear. Ryan Downward, I've talked about him on this channel before. He is the Packers defensive backs coach. He's been there for 3 years. Him and Duggan, who's also on this list, Sean Duggan, they've been with Hafley at multiple different places. So they've got deep ties to him. Johnny Holland, the current 49ers coach. We covered DeMarcus Covington. Derek Ansley, he's the defensive pass game coordinator. Vince Ogahobas, he has been with him for a while too. He came over there as the defensive line coach in Green Bay. In Boston College. And then he was a defensive line coach in Green Bay as well. He followed him. Jim O'Neill, he's a Lions defensive assistant. Rob Smith, he's a Rutgers defensive assistant. They've got ties back to college. And so does Azair Abdul Rahim. He's at Maryland. They've got ties all the way back. He was actually a co-defensive coordinator at Boston College for Hafley at one point. So those are some names I would tell you to keep an eye out for him as he continues to fill up the staff. I will continue filling up those lists because there are more people I want to add to that. Like I didn't have Jerrod Johnson and I want to add special teams, but I didn't have Jerrod Johnson on the list, so he could be added to it because he's getting a legitimate interview, right? But some guys that Nate Shieldhouse, the quarterback coach, from the Rams, I would be calling him. I would be bringing him in to talk to. He's a rising young star if you're going for a first time OC. So, man, listen, gotta like everything that was said and all the takeaways from today's press conference. Obviously, we are all in wait and see approach because we've been burned too many times by new regimes and first time head coaches. But hey, there's nothing we can do to fix this or change this. We have to let it play out. And who knows? Every time we've been excited about someone and it hasn't worked out, now the mood is much more somber. It's much more reserved. It's much more hesitant. And maybe this is the time it works out. All we know is time will tell us that answer. And we just got to go on the ride. And we won't know until the ride is over. So, ladies and gentlemen, do me the favor, smash the like button. If you're new, go ahead and subscribe. Almost 500 of you in the room. Appreciate each and every one of you coming through. And please do me the favor. I want you to check out one of the sponsors of this video. And that, of course, is Clean the World. All right. Clean the World work with over 8,300 hospitality partners to divert their soap bars and plastic amenities from landfills and recycle the collected soap into new bars. By doing so, Clean the World helps reduce pollution, save water, and decreases the carbon footprint of thousands of hotels globally, while helping improve the lives of women, children, and communities. Since it was established in 2009, Clean the World has distributed over 80 million bars of soap. The organization has diverted 9 million pounds of plastic amenity bottles and over 29 million pounds of total waste from landfills. Help Clean the World Foundation and provide an estimated 17 billion hand washes to those in need across the globe. By recycling soap and other discarded hygiene products, Clean the World saves lives with items that traditionally end up in landfills. You can donate or volunteer to help Clean the World's cause at cleantheworld.org. That's cleantheworld.org. Guys and gals, I appreciate you for coming through. Like I said, do me the favor, smash the like button. If you're new, go ahead and subscribe. And don't worry, when 2 is gone, the Patreon and channel member info will be flowing to all of you because I know people keep asking. Fins up. We'll catch each and every one of you on the next time. Have a fantastic rest of your day.